Okay, so yesterday we went over the strengths and weaknesses of the Union. Now we're going to go over the strengths and weaknesses of the Confederacy. Basically, the Confederacy are the states that left the United States and created their own country, and these states are all exclusively in the South. So we're going to talk about the strengths first. The first strength is their military officers, their generals, their lieutenants, their sergeants, everything just simply had more experience than the Union. And this goes back a long time. George Washington, probably the most famous general in American history, was from Virginia, which, I mean, they didn't succeed. They didn't secede from the Union back then, but the South has always had a long tradition of military experience, and many of the commanders of the Confederate Army got their education at West Point, which ironically is in New York, which is in the North, which is therefore in the Union. This is also a defensive war. So most of the battles in the Civil War are going on in the South. The whole premise of the Civil War is the Union trying to take over the Confederacy, namely Richmond, Virginia. And so the Southerners, the Confederacy, and their army are all trying to defend the South with a lot of success in the beginning. The other positive, and it's related to military officers, is the fact that they have well-trained soldiers. Those commanders who learned how to fight in West Point are not going to forget what they learned. They will teach it to their soldiers, and not to mention, even if they're privates in the Army, they will have a lot of the same West Point experience as the generals. They also have a much more unified cause. They're the ones who basically started the war. They left the Union in the name of keeping slaves. That's a lot more unified than the Union, because some of them were fighting to stop slavery, some of them were fighting to preserve the United States of America, and some were fighting for both. In the case of the Confederacy, the vast majority of Confederates were fighting for their states' rights, but especially the state right of owning slaves. Now it's time for weaknesses, which, as you may guess from the outcome of the Civil War, there were too many weaknesses for the Confederacy to win. And that first weakness is the lack of infrastructure. It's a brand new country. They don't have a lot of offices or organized enterprises that can take care of the different things that the South needs, like hospitals or schools or anything like that. And this is very related to the first point. They need to establish a new government. A country is not much of a country without a government at all. And so for the length of the Civil War, the length of the Confederacy's existence, the president of the Confederate States is Jefferson Davis. But other than that, there's not really much of a structure that's going on. They're busy trying to create themselves while trying to fight for what they believe in, which is, at this point, not a lot. They also lack foreign support. Now, you may remember from lessons past that the United States got a lot of help from France and Spain in order to become their own country when we were fighting in the American Revolution. We got a lot of military and financial support from Spain and France, and you could argue that we wouldn't be an independent country if it weren't for those two. Now, ironically, the little support that the South had came from Great Britain itself. And the reason being is because Great Britain is in full swing in the Industrial Revolution, and they need cotton in order to run their textile mills, in order to make clothing and other things like that. And so, whereas all the cotton in the United States, it's in the South. So they want to acquire that Southern cotton. So they're willing to help a little bit, but they also hesitate to help the South because, morally speaking, they believe that slavery is wrong. And of course, it is wrong. They liberated their slaves earlier than the United States did. They had little to no industry. So, as you remember, the North has interchangeable parts, they have assembly lines, they have factories, and a lot of those factories were created to create guns in the first place. The South does not have many factories to begin with, and if they have any industry whatsoever, it's to process cotton. And because of all these factors altogether, their economy is just weaker than the Union's, and for that reason, they sort of are desperate for economic help, and that helps them. Well, it helps the Union win the war, and it hurts the Confederacy, and they lose the war. Thank you guys so much for watching. Since this is a video, you can fast forward or rewind to the parts that you need. I advise that you take notes. As I said before, we are going to have a scheduled Zoom meeting on Wednesday, April 29th. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you soon. Miss you guys.